The hour that police spent standing in the hallway of the school doing nothing has been called by Uvalde's local newspaper Uvalde's darkest hour ever. A woman who works at that newspaper, the Uvalde Leader News, said today that for some politicians, quote, guns are more important than children. She is talking about Republicans, of course, because it is the Republican Party whose official position is to assure that America's mass murderers are the best equipped mass murderers in the world, while the Democratic Party, for decades, has been trying to ban the sale of the favorite tool of America's mass murderers, the AR-15 assault rifle. The woman who said guns are more important than children said that today right to the faces of Republican members of Congress in a hearing in the House of Representatives.
We understand that for some reason, to some people, to people with money, to people who fund political campaigns, that guns are more important than children.
It is a great tragedy of this moment in American history that that statement is not shocking. That statement doesn't shock anyone today. That statement is simply a fact of legislative history. Guns are more important than children, and Republicans have supported that very principle with the votes they have cast for and against gun legislation. Republicans have done everything they possibly can to make guns as easy to get as possible, including assault weapons invented for use by trained soldiers in warfare. If guns were not more important than children in Texas, then they would not have had to build 19 child-sized coffins in Uvalde, one for Kimberly Rubio's daughter, Lexi.
Lexi received the Good Citizen Award and was also recognized for receiving all A's. At the conclusion of the ceremony, we took photos with her before asking her to pose for a picture with her teacher, Mr. Reyes. That photo, her last photo ever, was taken at approximately 10:54 a.m. To celebrate, we promised to get her ice cream that evening. I told her we loved her and we would pick her up after school. I can still see her walking with us toward the exit. In the reel that keeps scrolling across my memories, she turns her head and smiles back at us to acknowledge my promise. And then we left. I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life.
She is now haunted for the rest of her life for doing what we all would have done. Of course, she left her daughter at school. That's where her daughter was supposed to be. But because an 18-year-old had no problem legally purchasing 2 assault rifles and 1,000 rounds of ammunition and large magazines for that ammunition, the parents of Uvalde are going to be haunted for the rest of their lives.
I ran a mile to the school, my husband with me. We sat outside for a while before it became clear we wouldn't receive an answer from law enforcement on scene. San Antonio firefighter eventually gave us a ride back to the Civic Center, where the district was asking all families who had not been reunited with their children to gather. Soon after, we received the news that our daughter was among the 19 students and 2 teachers that died as a result of gun violence. If given the opportunity, Lexi would have made a positive change in this world. She wanted to attend St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas, on a softball scholarship. She wanted to major in math and go on to attend law school. That opportunity was taken from her. She was taken from us. I'm a reporter, a student, a mom, a runner. I've read to my children since they were in the womb. My husband is a law enforcement officer, an Iraq war veteran. He loves fishing and our babies. Somewhere out there, there's a mom listening to our testimony, thinking, I can't even imagine their pain, not knowing that our reality will one day be hers, unless we act now. Thank you for your time.
She's right. Because guns are more important than children, there will be more mothers who are haunted for the rest of their lives. The most haunting thing said at today's hearing was not said by a parent who lost a child. It was one word said by a doctor who treated victims at the hospital in Uvalde that day. The word flashed past our ears quickly, one word in the middle of a 19-word sentence. No one used the word again in the hearing. No one commented on it. The word now lives in the congressional record, in the transcript of that hearing, and perhaps that's where we should leave it, because it is the single most grotesque word that has been used to describe what happened. It was in the testimony of Dr. Roy Guerrero, a certified pediatrician who is himself a graduate of Robb Elementary School. Dr. Guerrero began his testimony with a reference to his Hippocratic oath as a physician.
I swore an oath to do no harm. After witnessing firsthand the carnage in my hometown of Uvalde, to stay silent would have betrayed that oath. Inaction is harm. Passivity is harm. Delay is harm.
Yes, all of those things are harm, and that is the harm inflicted on the American people and American school children by Republicans. Inaction, passivity, and delay. That's what Republicans always do after mass murders. Inaction, passivity, and delay. Dr. Guerrero remembered the old days at Robb Elementary School, which reminded me of my time in elementary school when no one was worried about anyone coming through the door with a gun.
Back then, we were able to run between classrooms with ease to visit our friends. And I remember the way the cafeteria smelled at lunchtime on Hamburger Thursdays. It was right around lunchtime on a Tuesday that gunman entered the school through a main door without restriction, massacred 19 students and 2 teachers, and changed the way that every student at Robb and their families remember that school forever.
Dr. Guerrero described his first minutes at the hospital as the gunshot victims were arriving from Robb Elementary School.
I raced to the hospital to find parents outside yelling children's names in desperation and sobbing as they begged for any news related to their child. Those mothers' cries I will never get out of my head. As I entered the chaos of the ER, the first casualty I came across was Mia Cerrillo. She was sitting in the hallway. Her face was still clearly in shock, but her whole body was shaking from the adrenaline coursing through it. The white Lilo and Stitch shirt that she wore was covered in blood, and her shoulder was bleeding from a shrapnel injury. Sweet Mia, I've known her my whole life. As a baby, she survived major liver surgeries against all odds. And once again, she's here as a survivor, inspiring us with her story today and her bravery. When I saw Mia sitting there, I remembered having seen her parents outside. So after quickly examining 2 other patients of mine in the hallway with minor injuries, I raced outside to let them know that Mia was alive. I wasn't ready for their next urgent and desperate question. Where's Elena? Elena is Mia's 8-year-old sister, who was also at Robb at the time of the shooting. I didn't find Elena. But what I did find was something no prayer will ever relieve.
The doctor's next sentence contained that word that is so disturbingly graphic. There has been some recent debate, as Chris and I were just discussing, about possibly showing photographs of what happens to children who are shot by high-powered assault rifles with bullets traveling at 3,000 miles an hour and expanding as those bullets pass through human flesh and bone. Some people suggest that those images would change America from the country where guns are more important than children. The theoretical model for that would be Emmett Till's mother's decision to leave his casket open after his lynching so that America could see what happened to her son. She did that in the hope of changing America. I don't know. I don't know what can change America, and I don't know if it would help to present any more graphic accuracy about what weapons of war do to children's bodies. But Dr. Guerrero told us what we would see if we saw what happened to the children in Uvalde. And I, for one, know that I absolutely do not want to see that. There was no warning issued before Dr. Guerrero described what happened to those bodies in today's hearings, but I must issue a warning now. The next sentence you are about to hear contains a word that you have not heard before about what happened to at least 2 children, the first 2 dead children at the hospital that Dr. Guerrero saw. It is by far the single most disturbing thing and most graphic thing I have ever heard about a mass murder, and you will never forget it. And maybe for you, the best decision is to just leave that word buried in the congressional record and never know it. But it is the truth of what happened, and Dr. Guerrero is going to be haunted by this for the rest of his life, and he told this truth to Congress because he wants us to know this truth. And so here is Dr. Guerrero's description of the first 2 dead bodies he saw, a sight that he says, quote, "No prayer will ever relieve."
2 children whose bodies have been pulverized by bullets fired at them, decapitated, whose flesh had been ripped apart.
Decapitated. Not a single Republican who heard that today was moved by that word, not one. Democrats want to ban the sale of the weapons that do that to children, but Republicans want everyone to be able to buy assault weapons, including 18-year-olds. Republicans defended that at today's hearing, even after hearing Dr. Guerrero tell them that a mass murderer with an AR-15 in an elementary school classroom literally blew the heads off children. That didn't change the thinking of one Republican on that committee today, not one. I thought I knew what those weapons could do, but I didn't know that. Decapitated. That's why they needed green sneakers to identify the body of one of the kids, as Matthew McConaughey told us yesterday. That's why they needed DNA tests in some cases. That's part of why parents waited so long to find out if their kids were dead or alive. And that's why Matthew McConaughey, although he was mightily trying to control his anger, found himself literally pounding the table once yesterday in the White House press briefing room. Decapitated. If al-Qaeda did that to 2 American soldiers, Republicans would be willing to wage a war over that. But if you do it in an American classroom, you will get inaction, passivity, and delay from those very same Republicans. Dr. Guerrero said today, "I became a pediatrician because I knew children were the best patients." He told the story of his patient, Mia, overcoming liver disease and finding her alive at the hospital that day. Mia was alive because, as we first reported to you on this program 2 weeks ago, she covered herself in blood, the blood of her dead friend, so that the murderer would think that Mia was already dead. Mia testified to the committee today from her home in Uvalde.
My name is Mia Cedillo, and I go to elementary. We were just watching a movie, and then she got an email, and then she went to go lock the door, and he was in the hallway, and they made eye contact, and then she went back in the room to show us go hide, and then we went to go hide behind my teacher's desk and behind the backpacks. And then he shot the little window, and then he went to the other classroom, and then he went, there's a door between our classrooms, and he went to there and shot my teacher and told my teacher goodnight and shot her in the head. And then he shot some of my classmates and the whiteboard. When I went to the backpacks, he shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and I put it all over me. And
did you do then when you put the blood on yourself?
Just stay quiet, and then I got my teacher's phone and called 911.
And what did you tell 911?
I told her that we need help and to send the police in our classroom.
If there was something that you want people to know about that day and about you, right? Or things that you want different, what would it be?
To have security.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?